Welcome to a journey through time, exploring one of America's most remarkable love stories, that of John and Abigail Adams. In the heart of 18th century colonial America, their lives began, shaped by a world on the cusp of profound change. John, a brilliant lawyer, and Abigail, an intellectual woman ahead of her time, were destined to meet. Their early lives, though separate, laid the foundation for a partnership that would help forge a nation. This is the tale of their enduring love, resilience, and unwavering commitment to each other and their country. Their paths crossed, sparking an immediate intellectual connection. Their courtship was unconventional, yet deeply profound. Through letters, they explored ideas, shared dreams, and built a bond that transcended distance and societal norms. Abigail's sharp wit and John's earnest ambition found common ground, fostering mutual respect and admiration. Their correspondence became a testament to their growing affection, revealing minds perfectly matched. Despite initial reservations from Abigail's family, their love prevailed, leading to their marriage in 1764. Their union was not just of hearts, but of minds, a partnership ready to face the challenges of a new era. They established their home, a haven where intellect and affection intertwined, nurturing their growing family. Their early years together were filled with the joys and struggles of colonial life, always supported by their deep connection. John's legal career began to flourish, hinting at the significant role he would soon play in public life. Abigail, ever his intellectual equal, offered counsel and encouragement, a true partner in every sense. As John's political star rose, so did the demands on their relationship, often forcing them apart for extended periods. These separations, though painful, strengthened their bond, sustained by an extraordinary exchange of letters. Abigail, with remarkable strength, managed their household, raised their children, and oversaw their farm. Her letters to John were not merely personal. They were insightful observations on politics, society, and the war. John, in turn, shared his struggles and triumphs, finding solace and wisdom in her words. Their correspondence painted a vivid picture of their emotional depth and shared commitment to American ideals. These letters became a lifeline, bridging the vast distances that separated them during critical historical moments. The American Revolution ignited, and both John and Abigail found themselves at the heart of the struggle for independence. John, a key figure in the Continental Congress, tirelessly advocated for independence, shaping the nation's future. His diplomatic missions abroad were crucial, securing alliances and financial support for the fledgling United States. Meanwhile, Abigail, from home, was a keen observer of political events, offering her insights and counsel. She famously urged John to her strength and resilience during these tumultuous years were a cornerstone of their family and the nascent nation. Together, they navigated the perils of war and the birth of a nation, each playing a vital, distinct role. After the Revolution, John's career continued its ascent, culminating in his election as the second President of the United States. Abigail, as First Lady, became an influential figure, offering counsel and shaping the social landscape of the new capital. Their partnership remained the bedrock of his presidency, a testament to their shared vision for America. In their later years, they retired to Quincy, Massachusetts, reflecting on a life of service and profound love. Their correspondence continued, filled with warmth, humor, and enduring affection, even after decades of marriage. The Adams legacy is not just one of political achievement, but of an extraordinary human connection. Their story reminds us that behind every great historical movement are the personal sacrifices and unwavering bonds of love. John and Abigail Adams, a partnership that shaped a nation, and a love that stood the test of time.
You know, we talk a lot about the founding fathers, but what about the founding mothers? Abigail Adams was, without a doubt, a founder of the United States, but her story is so often just a footnote to the men in her life. So today, we're going to change that. We're pulling back the curtain on her immense influence.
Okay, so right off the bat, here's a fact that it sets her apart completely. Abigail Adams is one of only 2 women in all of American history to be both the wife of a president, John Adams, and the mother of another one, John Quincy Adams. I mean, think about that. That is an absolutely incredible distinction. But see, just defining her by her famous husband and son, that really doesn't do her justice, does it? So who was this woman? What was going on in that mind that helped shape not one but two presidencies and the very foundation of a new nation? All right, so to really get a handle on who she was, we've got to start at the source of her power. And that was her absolutely brilliant mind and this remarkable partnership she had with her husband, John. You have to understand, this was not your typical 18th century marriage. No way. It was a true intellectual alliance. So, like pretty much all girls of her time, Abigail wasn't allowed to have a formal education. But did that stop her? Not a chance. She had this fierce, insatiable thirst for knowledge, so she just devoured the books in her family's libraries. She taught herself history, philosophy, literature, the whole shebang, and she ended up becoming one of the most well-read women of her entire generation. And you have to get this. For huge, long stretches of time, she was doing it all on her own. While John was off in Philadelphia and then Europe, building a new country, Abigail was back home in Massachusetts for years at a time. And she wasn't just raising the kids. Oh no, she was running the family farm, managing all their finances, their investments, and she did it with incredible skill. And you can just feel the loneliness in this quote, right? How many snowbanks divide thee and me? Their entire connection, for years, was sustained by this constant flow of letters. And these weren't just wish you were here notes. We're talking about a correspondence just jam-packed with political debate, strategic advice, and, of course, deep affection.
Okay, so this incredible intellectual partnership is what leads us to her most famous and maybe most important political act. Think about it. While John and all the other founders are busy debating the rights of man, Abigail steps in to make sure they don't forget a pretty critical question about, the other half of the population.
Here it is. In March of 1776, she sends this incredibly powerful plea to John while he's literally helping draft the laws for the new United States. It is such a bold, direct demand for legal rights for women. And get this is happening while the ink on the Declaration of Independence was barely even dry. The audacity is just wow. And oh, she did not stop there. She basically warns him of a rebellion if women are ignored. She flat out declares they won't be bound by any laws they had no voice in making. Now, John's response, well, it's pretty dismissive, maybe a little teasing. He jokes that he's not about to surrender the name of masters. But that little exchange, it just highlights how unbelievably radical her ideas were for that time. And look, this wasn't just some one-off comment. This was part of her core, consistent worldview. She was a huge believer in education for women. She was a vocal, passionate opponent of slavery, calling it out as this fundamental hypocrisy in a nation that was supposedly fighting for liberty. And she didn't just talk the talk, she walked the walk. She personally made sure a young, free black man in her town got an education, even when her neighbors objected.
So then John Adams becomes the second president, and Abigail's role completely evolves. I mean, she utterly shatters the mold of the quiet domestic first lady that Martha Washington had established. Instead, she becomes this active and, pretty controversial political force.
Her political savvy was so well known, in fact, that her husband's opponents came up with a nickname for her. They mockingly called her Mrs. President. Now, of course, it was meant to be an insult, right? But looking back, it's actually the perfect acknowledgement of just how much power she really had. And boy, did she earn that title. Let's break it down. She was John's absolute closest advisor on policy. Her letters show she knew what was happening way before the public did. She actually used the press to plant stories supporting her husband's agenda. And she was a staunch supporter of his policies, even the really controversial ones like the Alien and Sedition Acts. She was a political partner in every single sense of the word. But amidst all this high-stakes political drama, there's this one detail about her that I just love. It's so human. So when the Adamses became the very first family to live in the new president's house in Washington, D.C., what we now call the White House, it was basically still a construction site. And what does the ever-practical Abigail do? She uses the grand, but totally unfinished East Room to hang up the family's laundry to dry. So when we look back, how should we remember Abigail Adams? Well, maybe the best way is through the incredible historical record that she herself created.
Get this number in your head, 1,200. That's how many letters survived between John and Abigail. And this is so much more than just a collection of old mail. It's one of the most detailed, most intimate windows we have into the minds of any two major figures from that entire era.
You don't have to take my word for it. The historian Joseph Ellis calls their letters a treasure trove. He argues they're the most revealing correspondence of their kind in American history. And here's the kicker. He actually concluded that Abigail, the self-educated woman, was a better and more colorful writer than John. And John was considered one of the great letter writers of his time.
And her legacy, it absolutely holds up today. When historians do those rankings of America's first ladies, Abigail Adams is consistently in the top tier. Almost always, she comes in at number 2, right behind the one and only Eleanor Roosevelt. That tells you something.
So what we have is a strategist, an advisor, and a truly revolutionary thinker who managed to wield immense influence, all from the margins of power. And that just leaves us with this one final, lingering question, doesn't it? If she accomplished so much without ever having a formal role, what on earth could she have achieved if she'd ever been given an actual seat at the table?
You know, when you hear the name John Adams, your mind probably jumps to founding father, second president, a real heavyweight of American history. But behind that patriot was a partner who was every bit his equal. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on Abigail Adams, a woman whose influence truly shaped not just a family, but a nation.
So let's just start with this question. Who really built the Adams family legacy? Was it the guy whose name is all over the history books? Or was it the woman who was running the home, managing the farm, raising the children, and, as you're about to see, mastering the finances that made it all possible?
And you don't even have to take my word for it. Just look at John's own letters. He was constantly admitting his own vanity to her, basically asking for her approval. This wasn't just pillow talk. This shows how much he relied on her judgment right from the very beginning. It was a partnership of equals, full stop.
But, you know, this incredible partnership didn't exactly have a storybook start. Actually, their relationship kicked off with a bit of skepticism and a whole lot of family drama. I mean, you gotta love this. Get this. John Adams, this up-and-coming lawyer, meets a 15-year-old Abigail Smith for the first time, and his first impression is, well, he was not a fan. It's just a great reminder that some of the greatest love stories don't start with fireworks. And the hurdles didn't stop there. So Abigail's dad, he was fine with the match. But her mother? Oh, she was absolutely appalled. She thought John was just some country lawyer who, and I quote, reeked of the farm. So right away, they had to deal with some pretty serious social pushback. But they finally get married. And just picture this scene for their new beginning. They didn't have some fancy carriage. Nope. The two of them rode on a single horse to their new home, a little farm in Braintree. They were literally starting from scratch, together. So they've got this humble start, but things did not get simpler from there. Far from it. Their life together was basically a whirlwind of constant movement, a growing family, and yeah, a revolution brewing in the background. And in just a dozen years, Abigail had 6 children. One of them, John Quincy, would go on to become president himself. This really grounds her story in the real, day-to-day, incredibly demanding job of raising a family while history is exploding all around you. And all while having all these kids, check out this timeline. Their home life was just unstable. They moved to Boston, then back to Braintree, then back to Boston, then back to Braintree again. Can you imagine packing up a household with small children over and over again? It's dizzying. So why were they constantly on the move? Well, it was all tied to John's growing career and the political chaos heating up in Boston. As he became a bigger and bigger player in the fight for independence, she became the one and only source of stability for their entire family. And this is where things really shift. Because as John's political star rose, it meant he was gone. A lot. And his absence is what really forced Abigail's role to change into the undisputed commander of the home front.
This right here was the major turning point. With John away for months, sometimes even years, first at the Continental Congress and then over in Europe, everything, the kids, the farm, the finances, it all landed squarely on her shoulders. She wasn't just helping out, she was in charge. And you can just feel the weight of it all in her own words. This quote from one of her letters, it's just heartbreaking. You can feel the loneliness, the physical distance between them. This was a huge personal sacrifice. And as a mother, she was the family's moral compass. It wasn't just about keeping the kids fed. She relentlessly drilled into them a sense of duty, of virtue, of what it meant to be an Adams. She knew she wasn't just raising kids, she was shaping the next generation of American leaders. But her role as commander went way beyond just the house and farm. All that time apart led to one of the most amazing collections of letters in history, and it's here we really see their intellectual partnership shine. I mean, get this, we have over 1,000 of their letters that have survived, and they're like a window right into their relationship. You see that it was built on way more than just affection. It was built on this deep, real respect for each other's minds. So what was this exchange like? Well, John needed more than a wife. He needed an advisor, someone to be a sounding board, to check his ego. And Abigail, she gave him all that and more. She offered incredibly sharp political advice and could quote literature even better than he could. So really, when you boil it down, John Adams wasn't just writing letters home to his wife. He was collaborating, strategizing, and debating with his most trusted advisor, who just happened to be his intellectual equal. Okay, so we have Abigail the manager and Abigail the advisor, but now we get to what might be the most astonishing part of her story. Let's talk about Abigail, the family's financial architect. So beyond running the farm and raising a future president, what was the secret weapon she had? What was the one skill that quietly secured her family's future and gave John the freedom to go build a nation? Here it is. She wasn't just balancing a checkbook. She was running their entire investment portfolio. Think about how radical that was at a time when women had almost zero legal financial rights. Abigail was out there playing the market, and she was incredibly savvy about it too. She had a strategy. Working through her uncle, she'd bought up these really speculative government bonds, the same ones used to fund the Revolutionary War. It was a massive gamble, but it paid off, big time, when Alexander Hamilton's financial plan honored those debts. And this is the bottom line. This isn't just some interesting side story. Historians now believe it was Abigail's sharp financial mind that built the fortune the Adams family lived on for the rest of their lives. John Adams may have built a political legacy, but she built the financial foundation it all stood on. Which really just leaves you with this one final thought. How many great people, how many famous moments in history are standing on a foundation that most of us never even see? Abigail Adams was that foundation, the brilliant, indispensable partner behind the Patriot.
You know, when we think of Abigail Adams, our minds usually go to the revolutionary firebrand, right? The brilliant letter writer, the closest advisor to a president. But what about the end of her story? So let's talk about Abigail Adams after her time in the White House. It's a chapter filled with incredible personal challenges and a quiet strength that, honestly, most people just don't know about.
It's a pretty interesting question, isn't it? What does happen? For Abigail, retirement wasn't some quiet fade out. Nope. It was a complete transformation. A return to a role she loved, but one that was about to test her in ways she probably never saw coming.
Okay, so this is where our story really kicks off. The Adams family is leaving the brand new, bustling capital city and heading back home to their own private sanctuary. So picture this. It's the year 1800. John Adams has just lost a really tough election. He and Abigail pack up and leave public life behind for good. They head home to Peacefield, their farm in Quincy, Massachusetts. And it's right here that Abigail is going to spend the last 18 years of her life. Years that, in a lot of ways, would come to define her just as much as her time as First Lady. Now, away from all that political noise, Abigail's world shifts. Her focus turns inward, and she steps fully into the role she was born for, the powerful matriarch of the entire Adams dynasty. And let me tell you, this was not a quiet retirement. Her influence just changed shape. She was all in on her son John Quincy's political career, writing him constantly full of advice and encouragement. But she was also hands-on at home. She took over raising her granddaughter, Susanna, and was the primary caregiver for her other grandkids, George and John, especially while their dad was off in Russia serving as a diplomat. She was the steady, guiding force for the family's future.
But this time in her life wasn't just about family get-togethers and political letters. It was also marked by a tremendous, heartbreaking loss. And, amazingly, a moment of real grace and reconciliation you might not expect.
In 1813, Abigail had to face what is truly a parent's worst nightmare. Her beloved daughter, Nabby, died from breast cancer. She was only 48 years old and had been suffering in terrible pain for 3 long years. You can only imagine how deeply that tragedy must have shaken her.
Now, in the middle of all this personal grief, another really complicated relationship comes back into play. Her relationship with Thomas Jefferson. I mean, on one hand, this was her husband's biggest political rival. The things he and his party had said and done had caused her real personal pain. But, on the other hand, years before in London, Abigail had actually cared for Jefferson's little daughter, Polly. She'd really grown to love that little girl.
So when Abigail heard that Jefferson's daughter, that same little Polly she had cared for, had also died, she did something pretty incredible. She pushed aside all those years of political bad blood, picked up a pen, and wrote Jefferson a letter of condolence. Think about that. In a time of insane political division, this single act of human empathy from one grieving parent to another built a bridge. It actually restarted their friendship and helped heal one of the biggest political rifts in the young nation's history.
Okay, so let's move toward the end of her own life, because it all builds to this incredibly poignant moment. A moment that's perfectly captured in her very last words.
The day was October 28th, 1818. Abigail Adams, at 73 years old, was dying from typhoid fever. And as she lay there in her home at Peaceville with her family all around her, she had one last thing to say to her husband, John.
Her last words were, "Do not grieve, my friend, my dearest friend. I am ready to go. And John, it will not be long." Just, wow. It's a message of peace, of love, and it turned out to be a quiet and shockingly accurate prophecy about the man she'd shared her entire life with.
And you know what? Those last words, they ended up being more true than anyone could have possibly imagined. Her legacy and that final prediction were about to be set quite literally in stone.
So how long did John Adams live without his dearest friend? Less than 8 years. Her prophecy that it will not be long, it was just this powerful testament to a connection that went way beyond life and death.
And the end of their story? It's almost something out of a movie. John died on July 4th, 1826. Get this, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, the very document that had kicked off their whole journey together. He was buried right beside her, so their partnership could continue.
Today, if you go to the United First Parish Church in Quincy, you can see the family crypt, and Abigail is right there. She's not alone either. She rests beside her husband, John, her son, President John Quincy Adams, and her daughter-in-law, Louisa. She remains, literally, at the very heart of the Adams family legacy.
So it really leaves you with this question, right? When you look at Abigail's final chapter, a chapter of quiet strength, deep family love, and incredible grace, it doesn't just end her story. It actually changes how you see the beginning. It reminds us that her greatest power wasn't just advising a president. It was in the unbreakable bonds of family and friendship.